Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Sam O'Connor, and if you can't see the big picture of my face behind me, I'm the State Member of Parliament for this area, and I'm just so proud to see this turnout. We've got 540 chairs, and it's 540 specifically, I've been told, and with so many people up the back there, it means that we've probably got at least 650 people here, which is amazing. And I had a quick look at the survey results from the QR code that you've hopefully all scanned if you've got your phone on my iPad, and of the 200 odd responses so far, we've got 97% opposition to the proposal for the redevelopment of the golf course. Can I begin this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're gathered here today, the Kumameri clan of the Yugambeh language group. Can I give a massive thank you, and can we get another round of applause for Landon, the principal of the school here. Landon very generously let me hire this for free, which he really should have charged because there's nowhere else we could have held this many people in the area. But he came in on his last day of school holidays to open up and help set up. So we're very, very appreciative to Arundel State School for letting us have this here. Can we get another round of applause for the P&C volunteers over there in the canteen? They've done a fantastic job feeding you all, and there might be some cold drinks left if you want to support them. The committee of the Arundel Hills Community Association would like to extend a warm welcome to you all for what will be a very informative community meeting this afternoon. The future of our suburb and its flora and fauna as we know it rests on what we do in response to this development proposal. And I will give another shout out as well to the koala who turned up at the entry there. Did you all see that? I promise we didn't plan that. That absolutely is just one of the beautiful things we love about our area. But we all know, and the community organisation knows from the huge number of comments on Facebook, just how concerned so many people are about this proposal. And turning up today really takes that to another level and really visually shows just how much you care about this and how important the future of this beautiful green suburb is to you. And your engagement with the council process and our coordinated action as a community is going to determine what will happen next with this suburb that we all love. So that's where I'll get on to our councillors we have with us today. Can I give a very warm welcome to Councillor Caldwell? He's the councillor for the neighbouring division, the north of Brisbane Road division, Division 4. He's also the chair of the Planning and Environment Committee. And I give a very warm welcome to Arundel resident and our local councillor, Ryan Belden-Lumsden. He's done a great job of keeping everyone informed of where everything's been at with the process so far. We've also got Mark Hamill here from the King in the North, from up the top of the city. Give a wave, Mark. He covers Pimpamar, Jake as well, somewhere up there. And William Owen Jones is down here too, who covers Helensvale. They've come along and we're very appreciative of that. Next slide, housekeeping. Is that up there? Oh, there we go, housekeeping. If you are younger and you've got a seat and you see someone that is perhaps not as young as you and might like a seat, please consider giving that up if you could. I don't know if we try to get some people up in some of these gaps up the front, but if there's someone that really looks like they need a seat, then please be kind in that sense. We've got toilets just to your right there up the back. The fire exits are pretty clear where you go if there's a fire. Look for the light. Mobile phones to silent, please. Please show respect to all of our speakers. We'll have our two councillors up after Jason gets a chance to speak. And the surveys and questionnaires that you filled out as you entered, we're just not able to handle that volume of questions. Like I said, we're already up to a few hundred responses already. So we'll be listing all questions and answers on the Facebook page or the group early this week so you can read the responses as much as possible. And we're going to try to get some of the written submitted questions to our councillors at the end of their session as well. But please scan that QR code if you want to do it online, or if you want the paper copy, please make sure you submit that before you leave, because getting that collection of information of all the residents who live around here is going to be really important for the Community Association as they go forward with their advocacy against this development. Okay, next slide, agenda. So the agenda for today's meeting we'll cover the reason for the meeting, a brief history of the group and who the group is. Jason is going to run through what's been achieved so far and some of the strong community feedback that's been received, and he'll provide a summary of how we all ended up in this hall this afternoon. Then the councillors will speak from the council's perspective. We've got some questions that hopefully will answer most of your concerns that they'll answer. I think about 15 questions that we'll run through, and the councillors will, I think Ryan will give the hard ones to Cameron and vice versa. But we'll work through those later, and then Jason will talk about the path forward from here and the need for neighbourhood champions in Arundel, and also our fighting fund for the organisation. And one final thing, a simple ask: there's a membership application on the website, which I think we're officially launching today, and we need you to join, especially those of you who have particular skill sets that we can use. That would be very, very helpful. This has already been very community driven. We've got a local guy who's doing our filmography. I think the father-in-law of someone made these shirts. Thank you for those. They're really great. They fit well. It's really going to be about as much of that local support that we can get from the organised people in this area. And I've got to say, in my 5 years or so as an MP, I've never seen a group of residents so passionate and organised. I've loved going along to some of the meetings at their houses to just see the passion to protect what they love so much. So if you can join that and be part of that, it would mean a lot, and it will really help us. Okay, how we got here, that's the next slide. That sort of gives you a bit of a run through of what's led to today, when the group was officially formed last September, and just before that, when there was discussions around the golf course being sold. Again, Ryan has done a really good job at updating people on his Facebook page as that has progressed. Pretty important thing is the proponents did absolutely zero consultation before they submitted the plans. So I guess this is the consultation that they're going to get, and they're going to be very, very well aware of what the community's feedback is. And then the history, I think that's our next slide, the history of the association. So the association was formed in September 2022 by concerned golf course residents who could see the golf course deteriorating before their eyes and knew a strong united voice was going to be needed to get the best possible outcome for the flora and fauna on the course, for all Arundel residents and our wider community. The group has applied to be incorporated, and that should hopefully come through in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and that will give them more authority as they take part in whatever negotiations might come up in the months and years ahead. But it also gives a really good opportunity for our community to get together and for people to be part of something and to really put the Arundel Hills name out there as well. And then who we are, that's our next slide. You'll hopefully recognise a lot of these names, and you can see them. Give a wave if you've got one of these wonderful shirts on. There we go. You want to stand up, actually. Stand up if you're sitting down. Here's some of the committee members. Give them a round of applause. They've done an amazing job. All people giving up their time to protect what makes their home so special. And from there, I will introduce the president of this association, which is Mr. Jason Young. So can you please give a really big round of applause for Jason?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Thanks. Thanks very much, Sam. First of all, I've got to say I'm fairly blown away by the size of the crowd here today. Hopefully you've all got as much passion as what our executive group does in being able to preserve this group, to preserve what this green space means for the area. The reason for this meeting today, this community meeting was necessary to explain to everybody what is being proposed by the new owners of the golf course and to have residents of the Arundel and surrounding areas realise the size and scale of the impact that the current proposal will have on this green heart of the Arundel Hills area. The size of the task ahead to fight this proposal is huge, and we will take time to go through the necessary council assessment processes and possible legal challenges beyond that. It's likely we will have to raise a lot of money for our own legal representation and our own experts to build a case against the developer's proposal so that we can preserve this natural green space. We will be looking forward to involving the community in a range of different ways in which, and I'll outline that a little bit later on as how we can get other people in the community involved with doing that. Okay, what's been achieved so far? Well, so far our Facebook page has reached over 530 members. This group would be many times greater than that, but we've been advised to keep it local to the Arundel Hills residents. So the main reason for that is because the residents are more directly impacted, I suppose, by the proposal that's been put forward. We absolutely welcome the support of the broader Arundel, Parkwood and surrounding area community and beyond that, but we will be keeping membership fairly local so that if need be, we'll have a slightly more credible voice at any negotiating table or mediation if it comes to that. We've successfully engaged with the local media, Channel 7 and 9, Gold Coast Bulletin and ABC Radio to raise awareness of this issue and strongly articulate our objection to this development proposal. We engaged with the developers early on to do some mowing along the fence lines to stop vermin and etc. From entering some of the properties along the adjoining fence line. We lodged an application on the 10th of March to form the Arundel Hills Community Association Incorporated. This is really important. This will give us a legal entity to raise funds and allow anybody to become a financial member. This legal entity will allow us to have a legal representation to fight this DA, and that's really, really important. I can't stress that enough, that moving forward, if we are going to fight this proposal, we're going to need to raise a bit of money to be able to do that. We're currently developing a website to keep everybody engaged and informed, as well as receive donations once that incorporation has been approved. We're expecting that to be probably next week or the week after. We've also written to state ministers, the mayor, local councillors with our concerns regarding the likely attempt to rezone the area from sport and recreation to a residential use, and to seek their assurances about having open and transparent assessment processes and their advice on ways in which the community will be able to have its say. We particularly asked how environmental protections for our endangered koala population will be upheld. Like Sam said, that koala out the front there, to me, was a good omen this morning. Unbelievable. Next slide. Our strong community feedback. The response from the community, looking out here today, it's overwhelming. It's been incredibly encouraging, and it's clear that the residents are passionate about preserving our local area. We're hearing their concerns about a number of different matters. Number one, I suppose, is the environmental threats to wildlife through the habitat destruction. In particular, the resident population of over 40 endangered koalas, along with other fauna and trees, such as blackbutts. Massive increase to traffic congestion in the area that has already experienced significant traffic problems. Napa Road and Arundel Road are already severely congested, especially around the Arundel State School and down along AV Patterson as well. Adding an estimated 1,000 more vehicles to the local streets will only cause much more local congestion to roads and exacerbate problems with access to arterial roads. Increased noise and air pollution, thousands of cars added to the local area. Flood risk, altering existing waterways through the golf course as it is at the moment. Removal of small lakes, proposing to build in known flood areas, and they all pose a risk to existing housing. fundamentally altering the character of the suburb. Originally, there were strict covenants to the Arundel Hills Golf Club estate. Introducing cramped infill housing with narrow streets will permanently alter the character of the suburb. The golf course was zoned green and recreation space 30 years ago and is the green heart of our suburb. We've seen no case for that original zoning to be changed. At the broader level, any change to zoning of this sport and recreational area will set a worrying precedent for other golfing and sporting grounds which are zoned green space. Overturning zoning to allow development on formerly green spaces would represent the thin end of the wedge. If this is allowed to proceed, golf courses, not just in the Gold Coast, but right across the state and country, could find themselves battling developers like we are here today. This is why we've been communicating and sharing information with other golf courses that have been targeted by developers for housing. There's North Lakes in Brisbane. There's another golf club called the Vines over in Western Australia, which is probably a little further down the road with fighting development proposal. And they've been extremely helpful in sharing ideas and concerns which are marrying up with our own. We've also been in contact with other organisations such as the PGA Queensland and Golf Australia as well. What we are fighting for. What a great shot. So we are opposed to this loss of green space. The golf course is the green heart of Arundel and the pride of our community. The health and well-being of residents that move to this area because of this beautiful green space is under serious threat if this development proceeds. I think old mate out the front in the koala might have had something to do with this slide, but this koala data was just released only a few days ago by council. This recently released data not only reinforces how important it is that all sightings are reported, but it is clear. It clearly shows that Arundel is the koala central here on the Gold Coast. We lead the way with over 165 koala sightings each year. Last year. What this reinforces, and must be a clear message to decision makers, that this Arundel Hills Golf Club green space area is a vital wildlife corridor and koala habitat spillover area between surrounding bushland, between Coomba wetlands and the Coomba Wetlands Conservation Area. Sorry, there. The development would also see the proposed removal of 3,581 established trees to make way for 450 small houses. Who wants that? That is simply an untenable outcome given that koalas are a declared endangered species in Queensland, and we simply cannot let that happen. We need to make our voices heard regarding this. At this point, I think I'm going to hand you back over to Sam to introduce the councillors regarding some questions from the community. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Jason. Can we have a round of applause for Jason, please? Okay, let's get our councillors up. Come on, Ryan and Cameron. Can we have a round of applause for them, please, for coming and answering all our questions. I might give you a couple minutes each to intro and then we'll move into it. We've got a mic over here. So do you want to go first as well?
Sure thing.
Yeah, so a couple of minutes each intro and then we'll get into the questions. Oh, that's mic there, sorry. Yeah.
There we are. Nope. Hold it in. Yeah, just like that.
There we are.
Lovely. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Bowden Lumsden. I'm the councillor for Division 7, and I'm here with my colleague, Councillor Caldwell. He's the councillor for one division just to the north, and he's also our chair of the Planning Environment Committee. We want to start by just thanking Jason and the Arundel Hills Community Group for inviting us along to talk to the audience today. Obviously, it's a very significant application for the local area, and we're very privileged to be able to come forward and explain through the assessment process, talk about council's involvement in that, and also thank yourselves for attending to hear us out on that. I've had the privilege of talking to many of you this afternoon, alongside since the site went into administration in May last May last year, I've spoken to many hundreds of residents going through this process, talking through the current status of the site, council's involvement moving forward. I've heard from many of you there's considerable angst around wildlife, particularly koalas, traffic, local amenity. Those concerns aren't lost on me. As Sam mentioned when he introduced me earlier, I live in Arundel. I was born here, grew up here. The concerns you've raised are not lost. I have seen the site firsthand. I know the suburb has built up around it and the involvement it's had as Arundel has grown over the decades. From council's end, all those concerns you've raised well and truly are considered in the assessment process. We have very skilled council officers who review what is a very substantial application. There's 2,776 pages worth of reporting that the applicant has put forward for council officers to consider. As residents, you will definitely have the opportunity to formally make submissions and raise your concerns or your thoughts on the proposal during the public notification period. I think that was initially put up online as commencing on the 19th of April. That's not quite accurate, but as a local representative, I will keep residents well and truly abreast of when that period will be. It will be 30 business days, that's definitive, but the actual date I will letterbox drop. I'm hopeful many of you will help letterbox drop at that time just to keep people as informed and up to date with the application as we can. But from this point, Councillor Caldwell and I are here to try and answer some recurring community questions. We're here to try and inform you and educate on the assessment process on council's end moving forward. What we're not here to do though is at this stage talk on a council position, because at this point one doesn't exist. It's so early in the assessment process, officers do need to progress through that more formally. But what we can say is that there has been pre-lodgement meetings between the applicant and council officers. I was party to some of those meetings. At that time, it was made very clear that the site is zoned sport and recreation. The minutes from the pre-lodgement meeting are available online, so if you have the opportunity, it is worth reviewing those documents on PD Online and reviewing feedback. But the summation of those pre-lodgement meetings from council officers is that council does not support the low-density residential component in the sport and recreation zoning. During that time, I personally made the applicant aware of Jason and the community organisation. They were put in touch at that point, and community consultation from myself and the council officers was very strongly encouraged. As I think Sam and Jason both alluded to, that community consultation didn't prevail and they've lodged the application anyway. So council officers will now assess, but despite the fact an application's been lodged, nothing has changed in the sense of the zoning. It is still zoned as sport and recreation, and officers will progress with our assessment.
Great.
Thanks, Brian. Cameron, do you want to do a bit of an intro?
Yeah, well, only just to say hi and thank you to the committee and to all of you for turning up today, because it's an important part of the planning process that the community get to have their say. And oftentimes when we go and talk to the community, they will say, Cameron, look, we just want you to stick to city plan. And I've got to say that the city plan on this occasion is pretty clear that we're dealing with the sport and rec zone that has traditionally been a golf course. And I think it's something that is significant, not just to the nearby residents, but I mean, I know I've been to weddings there, I've played some very bad golf there, and to the extent that there's vegetation, I know because I've found it with a 3-wood. So, look, I don't want to underplay how significant this point in time in the process is, because the application is to vary, effectively to dispense with city plan. So into the future, the sport and rec zone would not be the zone that would apply. In reality, it would be the new codes that are set up around this particular proposal, and that's why this decision and this point in time is so very important. Councillor Bard Lumsden and myself are obviously here because we are wanting to make sure we hear the feedback from the community, although it seems quite clear. And I also just want to acknowledge my councillor colleagues, Councillor Hamill and Councillor Owen Jones down the front here, who have also taken time out of their weekend, although they're not nearby councillors, to listen to the thoughts of the community today. So thank you all, and look forward to some positive discussions today.
Thanks, Cameron.
Okay, we've got quite a few detailed questions that we'll get through, and then we've got a list of some that Joe is bringing up from the floor. Excellent. I'll get them towards the end. There's some that have been submitted today, but we'll go through the ones that we had pre-submitted, and I'll kick off with thanks, Joe. Quite a detailed one. First, our group has concerns based off a lapsed approval in 2010 for 20 lots that the developer therefore thinks it's acceptable to lodge a development application for 450 lots, given that the lapsed approval deemed housing to be appropriate for the site. Amendments to the planning schemes and the implementation of new planning schemes warrant these previous schemes useless. Is that the case?
So a little bit about about what I touched on in the opening, and that is we just need to decouple the 17 lot approval from this new 450 lot approval, and I don't think, within reason, I don't think anyone was particularly bothered by the 17. That is a relatively small number compared to what we're dealing with today, but they are two entirely different processes. The 17 housing lots are approved, and that approval is due to expire in 2025. But this is a new process, which, as I said, effectively is to vary the application of city plan to the site.
And they're Arundel Drive, aren't they? That's where they were proposed.
They were close to Arundel Drive on that side.
Our Living City Planning Scheme 2003, which was superseded by the current city plan in 2016, allowed people to make applications for development for a 2-year period. After that, it was not possible to lodge under a superseded planning scheme. So how can it be possible to suggest a variation for zoning based on a 2010 approval?
Yeah, so again, we just need to move away from worrying about this being associated with the small approval. This is a new process, completely separate.
What's the likelihood of a variation application being approved as an addition to the city plan? What state government documentation should we be reviewing if the merits of the existing city plan aren't warranted?
So, I mean, look, an application for a variation is a legitimate and lawful application that can be made under the Planning Act, but it's no gimme, and I would expect that we all know that the council officers in the first instance will undertake a very careful assessment of the application. And just to reiterate what Ryan said earlier, the officers conveyed to the applicants in their early meeting that the proposal represents significant non-compliances with city plan due to the proposal not meeting the intent and purpose of the sporting recreation zone. Officers are also concerned with the character and amenity issues, impacts on the surrounding residential sites and the environmental impact. So that has been conveyed to the applicants, and I think it's probably a fairly clear message early on from the council officers what their view of the matter might be.
This one's a fairly obvious question, but koalas are now listed as an endangered or threatened species, including under the federal EPBC Act. How will this proposed development impact koala populations?
Well, as Jason outlined in his speech at the start, there's significant environmental factors to be considered in this application. The proposal suggests the clearing of 3,581 established koala habitat trees to facilitate the development. There's many hundreds more pages of environmental reporting in the application. All that will be considered by our council officers in the assessment. Further to that, given that the koala is endangered nationally and in Queensland, there will be state and federal referrals. So there will be departments from the state government and federal government who will assess the state-related matters, which will be the endangered koala, and they will report back to council officers on that as well.
Is there any way that they could achieve any required offsets?
So for offsetting, there's a number of legislative options available in terms of offset, whether it be replanting, monetary, that sort of thing. There was a mixed suggestion in this application in terms of replanting and a financial contribution for offsetting. All that gets assessed during the application. However, as Jason outlined, 3,581 established koala habitat trees is quite a significant number, considering that only 1,164 were proposed to be retained.
This next couple of questions are going to be a hard ask, but try to be as entertaining and enlivening as possible as you explain Council's process for considering the DA. Can you do an interpretive dance or something to
As
explain?
exciting as we can. First of all, as Councillor Caldwell outlined, this is not a variation to the existing 17-lot application. It's called a variation application. It's not a variation to the existing approval that is on the side. It's a new application to vary from the sport and rec zoning to its own development code, essentially, is what they're looking to create. Their application was lodged about a month ago today. It was on the 17th of March it was lodged, so it's still very, very early in the council assessment process. Our officers will review those 2,776 pages thoroughly. Often with applications of this scale, we do get expert external consultants to review important factors such as hydraulics, environmental, traffic, those sort of things. That will spark a lot of questions, I'm sure. Our council officers put out it's called a request for information, I think is the correct term. They'll put out a report with a bunch of questions of the applicant, seeking more information from them. The applicant will then respond. That may be a few times. There'll be a few backwards and forwards. At some point in the process, we'll move into public notification, where the site is signposted at all the street frontages, and that is the time where residents have the formal opportunity to make a submission about their thoughts, their concerns, their views on the application. Anyone who makes a submission during that time, a properly made submission, is then afforded appeal rights of any decision. It could get approved, it could get approved with conditions, it could get refused. No matter what the outcome is, anyone who's made a submission in that time will have the opportunity, will be afforded appeal rights. There may be some more requests for information, then it moves to the officers will make a report with a recommendation to elected officials, and at that point we will look to make a decision. In terms of timing, it's close to impossible to say as to what that timing is. Some applications can drag on for a long period of time. I'm sure Councillor Caldwell's got more to add than I do.
No, I mean, look, that's a very exciting summary of how things will go. In the end, and look, the community participation is important, not just because we as your local councillors want to hear your voice, but the technical part about being able to participate in the proceedings down the track is an important one, and I'm sure that the legal advice that you'll obtain will explain all of that, but, you know, the residents group has the right to make a submission, but each and every one of you as individuals also has a right to make a submission. So you can do that as individuals and then ultimately be afforded those appeal rights should it get to that. Now, when I talk about the appeal rights, we've got to remember that this is a situation where council may well refuse this and the developer takes council to court. In those circumstances, you are also still afforded the ability to participate in that proceeding. So there's a number of ways that it might play out, all of which is important for you to be a part of.
So just adding to that point, as Councillor Caldwell, everyone is able to make a submission during that public notification period. However, it is important, it's called an impact assessable application. We want to know your thoughts on the impacts of the application. Rather than just lodging I absolutely love it or I absolutely hate it, it is important that any impacts, positive or negative, that you foresee of the application, raise those in your submission, because all those points are considered by our council officers in their assessment process. So we want to know in detail your thoughts, not just your thoughts, but also why you have those thoughts, and they all then get considered thoroughly.
And there'll be more on that later, and the association will be very keen to help everyone get the best possible submissions in. I'll also have my office team helping out. I haven't told them that yet, but Joe's put the thumbs up, excellent. They did a great job a few years ago with the city plan changes in Labrador, helping residents get local submissions in and the right feedback. How is the development application assessed when building works are proposed in known wildlife habitat? Why is it not mapped as koala habitat on city plan layers?
Well, there is some mapping that applies to the site, there's no doubt about that, but we also know that because it's been a golf course, there's a fair portion of it that's been cleared over time. So the officer's assessment of the application will match up where there may be a conflict between mapped environmental areas and what's proposed. But that's not to say that there's not environmental values in areas that aren't mapped, and that might also be considered.
And similarly, how is it assessed when there's building works proposed for a floodplain?
Just on the wildlife component. So I don't know if David Cuscieri from Koalas on the Green is here this afternoon, but he's up the back. Thank you. So feel free to stand up, David. He's runs a group called Koalas on the Green, which is a fantastic group.
Good on you, David. Did you supply the koala out the front? Was that you?
So Koalas on the Green is very involved in a lot of environmental things around the coast, but particularly at the former golf course site, they've been planting koala habitat trees for several years. So although certain areas may or may not be mapped on the course, the mapping isn't updated every couple of months, so things can be out of date, but there is ground truthing in terms of the environmental reports, tree surveys, that sort of thing. So there might be areas that perhaps are or aren't mapped on the online software. However, there's been a lot of trees planted by a group of dedicated volunteers for a long period of time. So I imagine they've only further established as the years have gone on.
And floodplain, Cameron?
Yeah, so I mean, look, we as a city, we have a long and very good history of making sure that we are flood and resilient to any kind of storm effects and weather impacts. So we do a lot of work in the space of making sure that people's homes don't flood, and there's a huge amount of data that helps us do that. So we will be, with this application, as with all applications, very concerned about what is being placed in the floodplain, if anything.
And you sort of touched on this before, Cameron, on the council voting process. Do you want to work through how it goes to your committee and then it goes to the full council? Do you want to run through that?
Yep, so the officers will compile a report. The report will probably be, maybe a ream of paper thick. Ultimately, it will come to a conclusion which says, dear councillors, we think you should approve or refuse this. Now, whatever that recommendation is, it goes to, because of the scale of and the interest of this particular application, it will come to the planning committee. The committee will deliberate on what the officers have assessed, probably get a presentation. There'll be a vote of that committee which effectively puts forward a recommendation to full council to adopt. Council may simply adopt that same recommendation or may go through another process of talking about it and coming to the same or different conclusion. But that's where the final vote is taken in the council chamber, where the majority of the council cohort needs to make a decision.
And thank you again to Councillor Hamill and Councillor Owen-Jones for being here. The appeal process, you sort of touched on it before with the courts and the council. Do you want to go a little bit more detail on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, ever since I was elected, and I've been holding the position of the Chair of Planning since 2012, we take a very keen interest in how appeal matters proceed even beyond the council decision. Now, that's somewhat unique for South East Queensland, in fact probably unique for all of Queensland, but we do that because we want to make sure that we follow through on the decision that we make being maintained as the outcome, even through the court process. And we've got a very good track record of showing when, for example, we refused the Reedy Creek quarry, we then defended that position through the courts and were ultimately successful. Just as an example, the same thing applies to service stations and other, developments that people have lodged that we haven't felt we wanted to approve. So, we take a keen interest in those appeals, and as I said, that's important because it differentiates us from other councils, but it gives you the assurance that if and when it gets to an appeal, myself and also your local councillor will be following that process closely. Now, there'll be people who provide you with some legal advice, I'm sure, but the planning process is one where there is particular stages of mediation that are compelled, But the important thing about the Planning and the Environment Court is it is a court of expert evidence. So it will come down to the views of experts in planning and ecology and traffic, for example, and other jurisdictions or other specialties, to give that evidence to the court, and the court will then be the decision maker. So it's a new process where the court becomes the decision maker.
This will be one for Ryan, I think. Has the council identified or previously identified any areas of environmental significance on the Arundel Hills site?
So, as outlined in that mapping about koala habitat, vegetation, there's local, state and federally significant vegetation mapped on the site. There's waterways that are mapped on the site. So there's a whole bunch of components from the environmental standpoint that need to be considered. So it's not just the vegetation, not just the waterways. There's also a fauna study that has been undertaken by the applicant as well, which council officers now have the opportunity to ground truth and assess. As I mentioned before, the koala is endangered in Queensland and federally, so there's likely to be state and federal referrals for those departments to review from their perspectives as well. So I think everyone in this room wouldn't be surprised to hear that there's environmental values in the site, but the good thing is that all those things will get considered as part of the application process, and when it's out for public notification, you will have the opportunity to make those submissions and raise those concerns as well. And obviously everyone, I'm sure, lives in different locations of the site, the suburb, the Gold Coast, so you can raise those impacts and concerns from your unique perspective and how that will impact you.
And this is the easiest question of the day. Does the proposed development impact on those environmental values?
Well, I was a maths teacher before council, 3,581 out of, and if you leave 1,164, that's about 75% of the established koala habitat trees that have been proposed to be cleared to facilitate development. That's 75% is a pretty big number, and I imagine, yes, that would have significant impacts on the wildlife on the site.
How would the council propose to manage the increased strain on local roads and other infrastructure?
So again, traffic is a concern that many residents have raised with me since the site went into administration, and since the application was lodged. It's a concern that I'm sure many people in the room have, and that is one that is considered in the assessment process. As part of the application, the proponents have included a 229-page traffic impact assessment report. In that report, they've outlined some potential upgrades and improvements to our local roads. It's so early in the assessment process, though, that will get reviewed, and council officers and likely external consultants will assess and determine whether those proposed upgrades are appropriate or not to facilitate the increase on roads that the application would have.
And there'll be a state assessment too in terms of the impact on state roads like Olsen Avenue, Gold Coast Highway, the local school here, I guess.
Yeah. So we was talking about state referrals before for the endangered koala. There's referrals to the state and federal for anything that is of interest to those other levels of government. So the state government has Brisbane Road and Olsen Avenue as state roads. Any impacts or interactions with intersections at those roads would be referred to the state government for their own review in terms of the impacts on their roads.
And I just want to add one more thing, and that is, as I said earlier, the city plan is the ultimate expression of what we as a city want to see developed and how we want to see it developed and when. So what you see when you've got someone who wants to put 450 houses on a sport and rec zone, needless to say, council hasn't planned for that. So we have a thing called our local government infrastructure plan, which is where we do calculations on where we expect population growth to be and how we need to spend money in order to facilitate that growth. So this is effectively out of sequence to that process, which makes it much more difficult for council to plan for it because we haven't, and the onus would very much be falling on the developer to show that those impacts could be mitigated and road upgrades could be delivered if required.
Okay, so that's the end of the questions with notice, and that's the ones that the councillors had, because we wanted them to get as much information as they could from the officers. So now we're going to move to some questions without notice, and I've got these ones from the floor here. We'll get straight off.
Joe's put them in order, so no doubt the first one will be tricky.
Are they in order, Joe? Is that? I've just shuffled them up.
If I was going to ask one question, well, one of the questions that everyone's probably sitting there going, well, why is council even thinking about this? Like, why are you even assessing it? Okay? All right, thank you. It's all right, it's not my first town hall. We've been there, done this before. The reason, and it's not pleasant, but the reality is we are lawfully obliged to accept that development application and assess it, okay? As I've said, we've got a city plan that says exactly what we want the city to look like in this particular part of the world, and as unpalatable as it may be, we as a local government are bound to receive and decide that application. So for all of you who are wondering why we're even entertaining it, fair question, but we just can't avoid it, and I'm sorry that that's the case.
You are absolutely a soothsayer, because the first question was, what's the point of years of exercising a planning scheme? So I don't know, did you get notice of these, or are these genuinely from the floor? What are the council regulations and charges for removing a tree from a wildlife habitat? We sort of touched on that before with offsets, but have you got anything further to add on that?
I mean, look, the offset program is something that I think the state government ultimately sets the parameters for. I can't tell you off the top of my head what those numbers are, but it provides for either a dollar value per tree or a multiple of the trees to be planted. But I mean, what you see with this particular site is probably more that it's the type of place that can actually do with more trees, not less. So I think there's actually an opportunity for this site. There's actually an opportunity for this site to do some heavy lifting to provide offsets for other infrastructure. So certainly in the wash-up, wherever it lands, I mean, I would like to see that there might actually be some improved environmental outcomes.
I've just selected a question from the pile that goes on from that very nicely. Is it possible for the council to buy back the land from the developers to put it in the hands of the community?
Okay, so I also anticipated this question. And it's a fair question. And it's going to be a long answer, so just bear with me. As I said earlier, we can't do much more than have city plans say what we want the area to look like, okay? And for many, many years, it's been a successfully run golf course, and sport and rec zone is entirely appropriate. And had council intervened in a golf course operation, I don't think that would have been welcome, because the ultimate outcome that we wanted to achieve was for a golf course to be operational in this part of the world, and it has been for many years. So I think we have to accept that for a long time it was never appropriate for the state or the local government to intervene. The difficulty we now face is that there's been an action occur that I don't think any of us anticipated was going to happen on this scale, and we have to go through a process of deciding that application. In the end, as I said just in the last answer, I think there's more potential with this site than there is even current value. And I know that Ryan wrote to the State Environment Minister, who expressed some of those concerns. Look, it's been a golf course, a lot of it's grass, I was paraphrasing, okay? But I think that potentially, there is a case to be made for the site to be acquired, but that is not actively being considered by the state government or by council, and the first and most important thing we need to do is to get through this planning process, because that may well simply resolve it of itself. So we'll just see how this all goes.
And my other role that I have, other than being your local MP, is as the Shadow Environment Minister. So if I'm the actual Environment Minister in 18 months' time, it's something I'll be very much keeping an eye on as well. We've got a question that raises the only positive being that this will provide more available housing. What would your response to that be?
I think everyone's heard over the last couple of years, especially since COVID came in, there's a lot of people doing it tough. There are a lot of financial hardship around the Gold Coast. There's a number of people experiencing homelessness for the first time ever, or rough sleepers. There is a need for more subsidised and affordable housing. This application proposes 450 lots, however that would not be considered in any way, shape or form subsidised or affordable housing. So in terms of addressing the need for housing and the accommodation crisis, not just on the Gold Coast but all through Queensland, I think Sam can attest to, there's shortfall of housing all through Queensland. There's probably more people experiencing homelessness for the first time than ever before. In that sense, there is a strong need for social and public housing, but this application just really isn't that.
Just want to add a little bit. So most of you in this room probably have had nothing to do with planning previously and probably don't pay too much attention to what Cameron says in the media from time to time about this. But I can tell you this, when I say that we need to use existing urban areas for housing, this is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about not cutting down trees for houses, protecting the green frame on the edge of our city, and making sure that we get efficient use out of land that's already been developed. Now, about 6 years ago, Council embarked on a process of trying to provide some new housing development opportunities in suburbs like Labrador and Southport, where we could take a 1,000 square metre block and put maybe a duplex or a triplex or a 3-storey walk-up to efficiently use that land. And the state government have held up those reforms, and as a result, we are now seeing the case being made for 450 houses to go on a golf course. So, Council has planned to provide more housing opportunities, and we, to date, have not had the support from the state government, which has been incredibly disappointing. And so again, when I say, broadly speaking, we are interested in making sure that we develop where there is already housing, this is what I'm talking about.
Very true. And from our perspective as the opposition, we want them to sign off on that. You ended at a very good outcome with the city plan update that you had, and I think they should get on with it. It's been far too many months. This one is one that I might save the councillors from, and maybe Jason could answer this one. Is it true that the developers have always intended to bypass council and appeal directly to the state or go to the courts? What have you heard on that, Jason?
Yes, we are fully prepared and thinking that this is a very hot issue. Subdividing golf courses up for housing lots proposes not just on the Gold Coast here, there's a number of different golf courses on the Gold Coast here which could be prime land for developers, and we feel that not going down that pathway is totally the best way. Yeah.
And for the councillors, is there any... when is the earliest that the developer could accept a deemed refusal of the project and appeal straight to the courts?
And just on that, we are, as a group, we are fully prepared that we feel that the developers are looking forward to going to the State and Planning Development Court. We think that's where this will end up, and we have contingencies in place, which I'll talk about a little bit later in regard to that. Yeah, thanks.
Look, it's very unlikely that they can completely bypass the council process because we're already in the council process. If, in the unlikely event that the decision-making window opens towards the very end and council, for whatever reason, had not made a decision, there is an automatic default position of there being a deemed refusal, at which point the applicant can go to court. But until that point in time, they have to go through the assessment process.
We've got a question here about the koala or green space levy that we pay on our rates. Could you fill us in on what that's going to, or how much is in the bucket of money, and what council might be looking at to purchase with that?
Yeah, so a few years ago, we undertook a program of trying to create a bucket of funds that we would be able to use to strategically acquire land. The biggest headline piece of land was the Greenridge site, which was at Pimpamar, and I've seen Karina Waterman in the crowd here today from the Coomera Conservation Group, who was instrumental in looking out for the Coomera koala population. We wanted to buy that land. It was a very large parcel of land with significant environmental values. In the end, the state actually acquired that land and will use that as offsets for the Coomera connector. So the money that we have in that bucket is a relatively small amount. It's probably between 5 and 8 million, I'd say. And we have used that to strategically acquire some land, particularly where it's going through some corridors to make sure that those corridors are protected.
On that, just the specifics that the Land Council has acquired since 2021. There's a 19 hectare parcel in Pimpamar, a 37.5 hectare site in Telebudra, and a 1.2 hectare site linking Burleigh to Springbrook. So all the sites we have purchased are to consolidate existing corridors and to ensure their preservation. As Councillor Caldwell just alluded to, in the grand scheme, our bucket of funds for land acquisition is relatively small in the grand scheme. That was a big part of why I had met with the State Environment Minister early last year when I first raised this site for its potential acquisition by the state. In the grand scheme, Council's got very limited funds when compared to the state government and the federal government. There's billions for Coomera connectors and light rails and 200 million for wellness retreats out to the west. I was hoping there was spare funds available for this parcel of land in Arundel. Unfortunately, it wasn't, and as Councillor Caldwell's alluded to, the council funds are very limited, and there are established critical corridors that we've been actively purchasing. This site is more so has potential rather than inherent value from the wildlife perspective this time.
Well camp, that was, not wellness, well camp.
Well camp.
That was the $250 million facility built out.
Okay, I thought it was 200 million, it was 250, and there was
Maybe, I don't know. We don't own it, that's the main point. Someone else owns it and your taxes paid for it, so that's great. The Queensland, on a broader point there, Queensland actually has the lowest proportion of conservation area of any state in the nation, and there's been a bit of a jump in funding recently, but for example, the site, that beautiful site up at Greenridge at Pimpamar would have been roughly half of the annual conservation land acquisition budget that the state government spends at the moment, and it obviously didn't come out of there, it came out of somewhere else. And it's also, for me, the one that really is just the crazy figure is the amount they paid for that land near the surrounds for the Coomera connector, because they botched the planning of that. $74 million the state government paid to buy that little strip of land, including about, I think it was probably about 15 million for that strip of 24 house blocks that they couldn't develop on Citron Crescent there in the surrounds. So the money is certainly there. This one's written in all caps, so I feel like I should yell it, but it's about it's wondering whether the rezoning decision is separate from the development proposal decision, and could the council decide that there'll be no rezoning for any proposal? And the point they're making, this is the statement part of the question, if we fight this proposal off, what will stop the developers from coming back with another one again and again and again?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, the application is to vary city plan to effectively nullify the current city plan's application for future developments that may occur on the land. If council decides the answer is no, then there is nothing to stop the applicant from coming back and asking for the same thing again, or something slightly different, or a new owner of the land might come in and apply for something else. That's the nature of how that can occur, but if the answer is no, then, you know, it pretty much signposts where any future answer might be to an application of this scale.
And this might be another one for Jason, because it's not something that councillors can answer. And Jason, Amy Patterson, in terms of the land being gifted, the answer is yes from what I've heard from the principal, but will the facilities be accessible to the public, or will they be restricted in the proposal? And is there concerns about the impact of the lighting, for example, on some of the sporting fields?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we really believe that the developers decided, rather than consult everybody here, they've sort of gone a bit sideways and tried to garner some support through gifting some of the land to AB Patterson. Even if that was the case and it went to AB Patterson, it still wouldn't be used for public space. Other people couldn't use it. The Arundel State School here wouldn't be able to use it. It would be gifted to AB Patterson and exclude other people from using it anyway. But aside from that, I think it was more or less used as more of a tactical way of garnering some sort of community support to help their own cause.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, Jason. The last question, without notice, I'll probably go back to the councillors. What can lot owners do about the unkept state of the site and any trees overhanging their backyards or any damage to their homes? What can they do if they've got complaints? Who do they raise it to? What's the process to sort of, in the short term, get it mowed or get things cut back or other things like that?
So from it's probably around August, September last year when the grass started to grow and it didn't have the standard golf course maintenance that it was getting previously, we've raised requests through the council process in terms of unkempt property. That's where it applies not just to non-functional golf courses, it applies to residential lots as well. If someone doesn't maintain their property and there's risks of vermin and other hazards in that sense, local laws officers can go and issue a warning, basically saying you need to rectify the maintenance of your property. From councils then, that's about the extent of what we have in that capacity. In terms of trees and overhanging branches, this probably isn't the ideal answer you're hoping for, but it becomes more of a civil dispute between neighbours rather than a council involvement. So it'd be more of a discussion between yourselves as residents and the proponent, the landowner, with the trees and any kind of concerns you have in that sense. But for unkempt property, we'll continue to raise requests. Our local laws officers will continue to monitor the site, and when it meets the threshold of unkempt property by council's standards, they'll issue them a notice.
Okay. Well, thank you, councillors. Can we give a big round of applause to the councillors? We'll let them go. Thank you very much.
Any others?
Is there any more?
Oh, do you want to do something on the floor, Jason?
Yeah, if you want. Any other questions?
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, we're going to do this, but I'm happy to do this. I love this.
We're going to do this, but...
All right, Jason, you want to roam with the mic?
If it's something different, let's just try and make it.
How about we'll take 5 from the floor? How about that? All right, we'll do 5 questions from the floor. Joe's going to come around with the roaming mic.
Hi, I actually am a teacher and I'm still strongly a part of the community, road traffic, etc. You've mentioned the koalas. What about all the kangaroos out there as well?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's probably fair to say that, the koalas have been singled out, I think, probably by the Residents Association because they're a very tangible and valued animal, but kangaroos, obviously the golf course got a fair bit of publicity in relation to their kangaroo population, so we care for all creatures great and small, so the fauna population broadly won't be just limited to the concerns around koalas.
To that. So the environmental reports that forms the applicant's application, they did spot surveys where they reviewed wildlife that they observed during a very limited period of time. They noticed 69 different species of wildlife on the site in that report, so that's all available in the application. But as part of that report, they also outlined this is a very limited snapshot given the short period of time that the reporting was undertaken. So that's all considered and assessed by our officers during their assessment. The koala has just been mentioned so many times. Because of its endangered status, that triggers referral to the state and federal governments as well for their assessment and review.
We've got a really persistent hand up the back there. Joe, can you see? Yeah, that one there. We'll go. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, I'm speaking with 2 hats today. Australian Wildlife Preservation Society, but also an apology from John Hicks, the chairman of the Community Alliance, which is a bunch of community groups that stand together on planning issues. I'd like to commend Councillor Bowden Lumsden to you because the Wildlife Society have approached him on a couple of matters and he has had some very stout and good concerns and effectual concerns for the environment. There's two questions. One is from the Community Alliance to Councillor Caldwell. The concerns lately of the residents in Mount Tamborine who got costs awarded against them in litigation that you're aware of and might like to comment on in terms of litigation and the dangers for residents. And Councillor Bowden-Lumsden, I know that Mr Young, the effective chair of your group, has made sure that the residents themselves are primarily in this school, which is very good. But Councillor Bowden-Lumsden will need support of other councillors once some recommendations have come through. And so we would be asking him whether he would be able to garner support if he comes to the conclusion that this meeting quite obviously wants. Will he be able to eventually garner support for other councillors to support him in his defence of the area? Thank you.
Thanks, Sally. So look, firstly, I'll just deal with the issue in relation to costs being ordered against some residents in Mount Tamborine. I'm vaguely familiar with it. I haven't read the case, but for the Planning and Environment Court to issue costs against any party, there needs to be, I'm going to describe it as fairly extreme circumstances. So it is not like the Supreme Court or the District Court where costs follow the event, where if you win you get costs. The Planning Court is not like that. I often say that if it's a fair fight, that everyone bears their own costs. Now the interesting thing about that lady, or one of the residents, she's now participating in a by-election to become a councillor in Mount Tamborine. So I'm watching more closely to see whether or not she gets voted in or not. So I'll hand over to Ryan now in relation to part two.
As I said, I've been trying to communicate with residents as thoroughly as I can since the site first went into administration. I know it's very important to the local area. Councillor Caldwell, Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones have given up their time as councillors today. This isn't in their area, but the fact that they've come along on a Sunday afternoon shows that they're acutely aware of the significance of this application, not just on this site, but for the Gold Coast as a whole. Variation applications, as Councillor Caldwell outlined, are legally allowed to be applied and the city will assess thoroughly, but the sustainability of golf courses around the whole city is going to be a factor moving forwards, and just again the fact that the council have turned up this afternoon shows that they have a keen interest in the space. They're here because they want to gauge community sentiment around the application, and they will make their decisions accordingly and in an informed way, I'm sure. When it comes to Planning and Environment Committee, I myself am actually not on the committee, although I'm sure I will still have speaking rights when the time comes. The other three councillors that are here today are on that committee, and then ultimately their recommendation will come to the full 15 councillors for a final decision.
Have we got any others from the floor? Oh, Joe's got one over here. Yes.
Just a quick question. You spoke earlier about the application to change the planning from sport and recreation to low density housing. Are you aware of any previous examples or cases where such an application has been made in the past, either locally or within the state? And if so, what was the outcome?
Good question. I can't remember the last time that we as a council gave a variation application. The City of Gold Coast is very much on top of our planning, and what you find that variation applications are often used in parts of Queensland where perhaps the planning schemes have not kept up to the development pattern that might be starting to emerge. And so there are other cases around the state. They are actively being considered all the time, but I can't remember it being done here on the Gold Coast, and certainly they're not a frequent tool because of the nature of our city plan, where it is well updated and well informed and always keeps pace with how we want our city to look. Variations are an unusual step for an applicant to take.
All right, we got
Just one more down here, I think.
just one more, Jason.
Yeah,
All right.
this fella down here.
Up here, Joe. You can run up.
Just yell out, mate.
I just want an estimate on timeframes. Oh, time frame estimate's an easy one. Then we'll go to this gentleman up the back.
As far as what,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the deemed refusal or which aspect?
So if it's a no from the council,
Yeah.
then it appealed to the land.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What sort of
great question. Yeah.
once it's gone to the land, how long are we looking at?
Yeah, so the timeline that I would expect for the decision to be made now, given the complexities of what's being proposed, we might be talking about a year. Once we start a planning and environment court process, you might be looking at another year to 2 years, depending on how long it takes for that matter to proceed. So.
Gentleman up there, yeah.
Good afternoon.
Oh, not you, sir, just this other guy first. Yeah. Yeah.
We've been through, however long this is, probably the most difficult question, only because I really just can't answer it. And I think most people in the room understand that both Ryan and myself and my council colleagues have to maintain an open and persuadable mind for when the decision is made, or ultimately we might be knocked out of participating, and none of us want that to happen. So I can't give you prospects. If I was wearing my hat as a lawyer, I mean, I'd love to tell you what I thought your prospects are, but at the moment I can't. So, yeah. No, the gentleman down the back.
You want to make this on the last
Yeah.
one,
Yeah,
because otherwise we'll be here all afternoon.
Yeah.
People
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Well, I just want to make sure look, it's important that as far as possible, we ventilate what the issues are that are important to you guys. So, and again, even if it's not answered today, send Ryan an email, send me an email. We'll make sure we try and get to all of the issues. Yeah.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to ask you a couple of questions. The first question is, I did actually speak to one of the developers today at my home. He came and saw me because I have an easement beside my property that's never maintained, and he came and saw me and he assured me that he was going to mow all that and do 5 metres around everyone's property who lives on the golf course, right? But that's not the reason. I'm concerned about the field they're going to give to A.B. Patterson that is completely wetlands. So for it to be a field, they're going to have to fill in all the waterways there, put up change rooms. And I brought that up to the developer this morning, and he tells me that that will be open to the public. All the public will be able to use it. So,
Okay, so I understand the question.
You want
Look,
two, Bobby.
essentially, the developers, as I understand it, are proposing to give land, a gift of land to A.B. Patterson. They are not giving them the facilities completed. They are not giving them lights. They are not giving them fields. And it's very likely that the development of those sports facilities and fields would themselves come under council scrutiny in the future. It is not to be assumed that the plans that are on paper are what council would actually approve should we receive an application from A.B. Patterson in the years to come in relation to the development of those sports fields. So all of those same considerations around loss of vegetation, light spill, traffic, parking, etc., would all still have to be considered in the future. All right, I think we're getting the
we'll leave
line
that
up.
there. Thank you, councillors. Can we give a big round of applause? That was
Thanks,
very,
everyone.
very comprehensive. You all now qualify to have a town planning degree, I think, after that. So you can go to Griffith Uni and cash that in. Thank you very much, councillors. Like they said, their door is open, their office lines are open. You can get in touch. Ryan's office is just in Parkwood there if you want to go in person. But they'd be very interested to hear your feedback. But we're almost done, everyone. I know this has been a long afternoon, but this is the start of a very long process. And our last little bit is about 5 more slides, and it's probably the most important part because it's what we can all do to help organise our community. And I'll hand over to Jason to run through those slides. Oh, you got one.
Yeah. thanks again, Sam. You better wait for the politicians to leave.
Me too.
Because no, you're safe, Sam. You've got state laws to protect you. Are they gone? Now we can say what we really think. Basically, what I want to let people know is that the role of the association moving forward is we don't always need to put a lot of faith in certain decisions. So at some point we're going to need to take this into our own hands, so to speak, and fight our own little battle here, regardless of what happens. Whether or not we end up at the state Planning and Environment Court, I've got a sneaky feeling that we may, and if that happens, we're going to need to raise quite a lot of money. But I just want to talk a little bit about the role of the association moving forward. Moving forward, we're going to continue to raise this public awareness of the development proposal and publicly oppose it wherever we can. We're in touch with organisations like Wildcare Australia, Koalas on the Green, Currumbin Wildlife Sanctuary and other environmental specialists, a number of whom are supporting us through their attendance here today. We've also made contact with Golf Australia and the PGA of Queensland, who are keenly interested in to see how this evolves. As soon as the association is incorporated, and we're expecting that probably in the next week or so, we'll be inviting everybody, all members, if you want to have a $25 membership fee from residents and friends of Arundel Hills and the surrounding area. If this does go to the State Planning Environment Court, we're going to need to raise significant funds in order to get our own experts to refute the arguments that are going to be proposed to us. Coordinating donations and fundraising will be essential to ensure this legal representation occurs. We also appreciate Sam's support in offering to sponsor an e-petition to Queensland Parliament. That's going to be really important when the time comes. As the council has alluded to before, there is time in this process for us to be organised. I can't stress enough the help and the magnificent team that we've got available at the moment, which have become organised to get us to this point here today. They're an extremely professional and well-organised group, and I hope that we can do you all proud with representing you with this issue as it goes through this process. Yes, the funding, we've gone through that bit. Got the website one there, Rog? Yeah. The website, the association's fledgling website is being launched today. The website will be the primary vehicle for keeping everybody in contact with our members and let them know what's happening. We will have a donations page and a GoFundMe section on the website, and in due course you'll be able to purchase merchandise such as these lovely t-shirts and stickers to publicise and help our cause. This really will be a big community support that we're going to need here. The website will also be an important tool to assist individuals to develop their own submissions to council, which the councils were alluding to before, when those submissions, when we can all express our own submissions once the development application progresses through the council. But that public notification period. This is where we can all chip in right now. These neighbourhood champions. As we've heard from the councillors, over the next few months, council will analyse the DA against the city plan and go through their planning and assessment processes, raising issues with the developers. At the point where the 30-day public notification period opens, a few months down the track, it'll be imperative that we are primed and ready to act by making submissions against this development application. Of course, the association will be lodging its submission, but we're also very keen to ensure as many quality individual submissions as possible are made to council by affected residents in the Arundel Hills and surrounding area. To support this work, we will develop a network of what we are going to be calling neighbourhood champions. We know that cut and paste style submission doesn't carry a lot of weight in the council's decision-making process. It's essential that submissions directly address the impact on individual households and neighbourhoods caused by issues such as traffic, increased density, noise factors, environment, flooding, all these issues. And we need to know how it directly affects residents in the area. That's the only way that council will take a serious look at those submissions. And if we get many of those, it's going to make our cause a lot more audible to council. The idea of this neighbourhood champions is to adopt a street or number of houses and talk with them, understand their concerns, make sure they know what's proposed, and offer assistance to them to develop their own submission, drawing on expertise and comprehensive analysis of every aspect of the DA to be undertaken in the coming months. These neighbourhood champions will be supported by a coordinator and be given all the necessary help and the tools and training required to help the residents. If you think you have the skills and time to be part of this process, we'd love to hear from you. By completing those forms outside there, if you think you're going to be able to help, please do. This is really a community effort here in letting council know that we mean business. Love this slide. As part of the work that needs to happen to be ready to make submissions, we are calling on volunteers that have certain skill sets and expertise in areas who can help to undertake a comprehensive analysis of every aspect of the development application. We are looking for people who have expertise in these areas: town planning, health and community, environment, conservation, engineering, hydrology, legal economics, assessments, submission writing and administration. We urgently require a bookkeeper or an accountant to aid in the management of our membership fees once we start to accumulate those, once we become incorporated in the next week or so.
That koala was actually generated by an AI, and I think the input was make a cranky koala on a branch pointing. So that's how that came
Pretty
about.
good AI.
It's not bad, eh?
So please fill out those forms out the front. If you want to become involved, we'd love to hear from you. Those forms are available out the front. Please pop them in a box, in the box provided out the front, and we'll get back to you as soon as we possibly can. I'd like to thank everybody who submitted the questions today. We hope most, if not all of them, were heard. We'll be loitering around a little bit afterwards, so if you want to come and say hello or have a chat to us, that'd be great. We will aim to upload any additional information to the website in the coming days. We're really heartened by the support here today, and we really hope to hear from a few people that would like to become these neighbourhood champions. There's lots to be done, and it's important that we maintain our focus over the next weeks or months, but looking by this outpouring of community support here today, I think we're going to be able to do that. I'd also just like, on a little bit of a personal note, to thank the businesses and individuals shown up on the slide who have helped us put this event on today. It's really important. I'd also like to thank Sam, especially for putting up this event today. Thanks very much, Sam. It's much appreciated, and we really appreciate your support. Finally, I'd just like to let all the residents of the area that oppose this development that we can win this fight. It won't be easy. These Melbourne-based developers could stand to walk away with $200 million over this. That's a lot of money. We are the affected residents who will fight tooth and nail to protect the green heart of Arundel and its population of endangered koalas and other wildlife fauna and flora, including the kangaroos. And we hope to do that to preserve it for generations to come. With your help, we can do this. We really can. You can't replace green space. Thanks very much.
I'll wrap up with the survey.